dancing party? 2 more minutes? Yes, no?
No, we're good. This song's ending. Okay, let's go. Well, hi everybody, welcome. This is our Google Development Group DevFest for 2022. Welcome. I am John Sturman, a mentor and a facilitator with Open Hub, as well as an instructor at RPI in the Computer Science Department. With me is Yulia Avchiknova. Go ahead, Yulia, you can introduce yourself.
I'm just Yulia. Don't try to say my last name.
Yeah, I still fumble with it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're really happy to have everybody here. Where's my cursor?
Interesting fact. Let me just say a few words. That we did have the GDG, Google Developers Groups, here in the Hudson Valley years ago. And I remember Alan since then. Alan, we actually ended up in the same train from New York City all the way to the Hudson Valley. And like, why we are doing the New York City events while we have this thriving community here in the Hudson Valley? And it was talk of passion back then. And I was amazed by Alan's knowledge and expertise, and by the fact we have the local Google developer expert here. Alan, I'm so glad to have you here.
It is great to connect with the local community again.
Yes.
Julia.
Since then, GDG Hudson Valley was put down, then it was up. And look who we have here. John and myself included, we were able to reinvigorate GDG. Please, please, please join back. I will put all the links into the chat, but we do need humans like Alan, Jamey, John, Jack, and all of you are here. So that's the talk. HVTech community is right here. How do we grow together?
So I want to start and just talk about Google Developer Groups a little bit. This is Google Developer Groups are a collection of developers in particular regions, and you know, we're spread. Actually, Google Development Groups are across the globe. We're part of the North American group.
Dogs included.
Yep. Specifically, you know, we are GDG Hudson, Google Developer Group Hudson, which really encompasses the Hudson Valley from Newburgh all the way up to Albany and Troy. Sorry about my dog participating. She's not really a good participant in Google Developer Groups, but she wants to participate. Anyway, we also, Google Developer Groups, we gather together for the express purpose of networking, learning technologies together, and collaborating. Usually, of course, because it's a Google Development Group, we're very much focused on Google technologies. That does not preclude anything more other things, but you know, we do focus on that stuff. Hold on one second. Let me just do. Recently, GDG Hudson partnered with GDG Lawrence, which is just at the very southern tip of New Hampshire, and also the Capital Region, which handles Albany, Troy, Schenectady. One of the organizers lives in Amsterdam, so you know, that particular geographical region. And we sponsored a study jam. Without the barking. Come on. We sponsored a study jam to learn Google Cloud technologies, and that was very successful. Several of the participants have already completed. They completed the course, of course. I did as well, and several of us are going to take a certification exam, and several people have already successfully completed the certification exam. And we were working towards what's called an Associate Cloud Engineer certification. We're going to continue this kind of work. These study jams will take place over probably 2 or 3 months of weekly or bi-weekly sessions. The last session we did over 12 weeks with 6 main sessions, and then every other week we would do just a study jam where we went over the technologies and talked about it and asked questions, and it was very, very fun. It was much more fun than I expected it to be, and I learned a lot, and it was just a really tremendous experience. And so Google development groups are cool, and we're really glad to share that with you and bring you some Google experts. Alan Furstenberg, excuse me if I said your name wrong. He's with us today, and he's what's called a GDE. Alan, what's your specialty?
That's a really long story. My primary focuses these days for GDE are with the Google Assistant, Google Workspace, and the Google Identity Platform. In the past, I've been known to be a GDE for Google Glass, Google Plus, Google's wearable technologies. So I've covered quite a lot of ground. These days, I also do work with Google's cloud technologies, particularly Dialogflow. So I'm all over the place. If you've got a question about Google technologies, if I don't know it, and I don't know a lot, I usually do know people that can help out.
Yeah, because we really are this very close-knit network. We also have with us Roman Jaquez, who will be doing a talk at 7 o'clock tonight. He's a Flutter GDE, and we're very happy to have him. So I really want to just give everybody a really warm welcome and invite you to participate with us in working with Google developer groups. I want to introduce Jamey Stevenson. Jamey, you could actually introduce yourself. You do a better job than I will, please.
Oh, thanks, John. Yeah, I'm Jamey Stevenson. I'm the executive director and co-founder of Tech Valley Game Space. We're based in Troy, but we work with folks across the capital region and beyond. I'm very happy to have connected with friends throughout the Hudson Valley. And we're a group that we're a 501c3 charitable organization that supports independent game developers and aspiring game makers.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jamey. And we've done some work with him as well through Open Hub in terms of facilitating some work that Jamey was doing in terms of bringing together game developers, which is a great addition.
Which we learn is a good, actually, developers group, which they don't think they are developers. They don't think about themselves as developers, but they are. And they actually threw out the party for startups and indie game developers, just highlighting how economically development advantaged is this group.
Yeah. So our program today, we're going to start. We'll start talking to Jamey about. He'll give us a little presentation about the Tech Valley Game Space. And at 5 p.m. we're going to follow up with Dr. Caleb Litaro, whose his talk is called "Watching, Visualizing, and Forecasting the World in Real Time Through GCP." He is a remarkable man doing really great work with the project. Hold on, I don't have it in front of me. Hold on. The project is called Yulia. What's the project called? GDELT.
GDELT. I will put links in the chat for your reference, but all the agenda can be found on HVTechFest.com.
Right.
I will put everything in the chat.
Then at 6 o'clock, we're joined by Nav Singh. Nav is a gentleman from Montreal. He's a GDE in Android, and he's giving us a talk about really an overview of Android 13, which is the latest version of Android, and there's some really cool additions to that technology that we'll hear about. And then lastly, Roman will give us a really great hands-on demo building microservices using Docker and Firebase. I'm really looking forward to all these talks, as well as I hope you are too. And without further ado, let's hand it over to Jamey.
Thanks
Oh,
again.
Yep.
Thanks, John and Yulia. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to participate and excited to remember if I know how to share my screen on Zoom. Let's see. Yes, I do want to. Okay. Are you able to see my title slide? Great. Okay. Yeah, so I thought this might be a topic that would be of interest to some folks. I hope it will be. I wanted to talk about game development in the capital region and sort of upstate New York broadly. I think there'll be things that are of interest to folks throughout the Hudson Valley here as well. I subtitled it A Secret History because I think that there's a lot more activity, certainly recent activity, but also kind of going back a ways. There's more game development activity going on than people are sometimes aware of within the capital region. And particularly on the indie side, there's a lot of people creating stuff who maybe just don't have a ton of visibility. So one of the things that we like to try to do through Tech Valley Game Space is help those folks connect and support each other and hopefully get a little bit more of a light shined on what they're doing, because they're doing really cool stuff. So let's see. Okay. Yeah, so just in my 15 minutes, I'm going to cover a few different things, tell you a little bit more about my background, specifically how it connects with what we do at Tech Valley Game Space in terms of supporting independent and aspiring game makers. A little bit about just generally about kind of the state of Capital Region game dev. And last but not least, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I'm sort of advocating for at the moment, which is now that there's starting to be some more attention paid to how we can support this sort of burgeoning game development cluster that we have forming upstate, I want to specifically make the case for why supporting independent game developers and that specific subset of creators is something that I think would be helpful to make a priority for various reasons. So I'll get into that. Let me tell you about little old me. Hey, that's me. little while back, that was me. A few games ago, looking slightly less haggard than I am today.
I remember this one.
Yes. I have a vague memory of this person as well. So this is me kind of early on. This was probably in the first few months after we formed Tech Valley Game Space. One of the first things that we did was start a meetup, and almost immediately thereafter, we started a little co-working space in downtown Troy for game makers and interactive artists, digital multimedia creators, and so on. So that's me. I do lots of little things that I think you can definitely put the indie label on. Indie is sort of a broad label in different creative fields, and game development is no exception. It encompasses everything from some of the types of things I do, like this Troy trilogy. These were a series of tiny free games that I just uploaded to a website for people to play that were inspired by the history and culture of Troy and the capital region. And yeah. So one of the nice things about being an indie is you can kind of make games on kind of more specialized topics that are personally significant to you, and just kind of use games to express yourself first and foremost. So this is a topic that I found to be very fruitful to explore creatively. More broadly, I love to create games that sort of have social justice themes on one level or another. So these are just some of many, but I do a lot of kind of tiny free games, and I try not to worry too much about making like a blockbuster hit. I just make things based on whatever topic motivates me at the current time. And it just so happens that a lot of those have been inspired by my feelings about things going on in the world around me. So this is just a little sample of some of those. This is one that I did recently. This is more of just kind of like a game, fun multiplayer game called Regicide, which you can check out if you're so inclined. I post a lot of my games to my itch.io page. If you don't know itch.io, it's sort of like Steam. It's a game distribution platform that a lot of independent game developers like to use to share their work. I also have a little fledgling indie game studio called Spoony Bird. So when I collaborate with other people on more substantial projects in terms of longer term development cycles, this is kind of the label that I tend to use for that. So been working for a while now on a game called Ding Dong Ditch, which is sort of a early 90s flavored adventure game. And one of the things that's really sustained me creatively since we formed this group was the community that's formed around Tech Valley Game Space. So, I've been doing independent development mixed in with sort of stints at different game studios over the course of over 15 years now in the game industry. And I find often the transition of going from kind of a bigger game development company to working as a solo indie can be a bit jarring. I know it was for me initially. It can be quite lonely if you're used to kind of the camaraderie of an office. I guess a lot of us have experienced that over the past few years of switching from, the office environment to suddenly working from home. I know that I found that to be a challenge. So I happened to connect with Taro Omiya, who is another local indie game developer who was in a similar situation. So I was doing indie game development from home. He was doing it out of the Niskayuna library, I believe. And we both wanted to kind of find other like-minded creators and support each other. So that was really the genesis of Tech Valley Game Space, which we formed in late 2014. And we've been going strong ever since. So I want to talk about making games in ye olde Capital Region. What a place. So some of you might already be aware that we do have, as I mentioned, this sort of burgeoning cluster of game developers located in the Capital Region. It's really exciting. And it definitely extends as well to like other areas in the Hudson Valley. There's a lot of exciting things happening at Marist, for example, with their game development program. So yeah, I think in my view, this extends beyond just the immediate Troy and Albany to elsewhere. And if you kind of put these things together, what we've got is this growing cluster that is significant enough that folks at the state level and beyond are starting to kind of take an interest, which is heartening and encouraging to see. So another nice thing about game development, as you may have experienced in other tech sectors that you work in, is it's been quite resilient over the course of the pandemic in terms of so this was a study put out by the Center for Economic Growth. They do an annual survey that's worth checking out if you want to kind of get the lay of the land for the Capital Region game dev scene. And so, yeah, this was their findings from 2021 that the local industry grew by 16%. And some of you might have seen also that this recently announced New York State has this game development support program that's in place that's really exciting. I know it's been a long time in the works, and I think that'll have a really positive effect overall. So those things are very exciting, but that's not what I want to focus on talking about. These are the things that kind of grab headlines inherently. This is not kind of the secret history part, but this is all stuff that contributes towards growing the local game industry. So it is super significant and exciting to see. But the actual cluster that we have upstate consists of a whole, constellation of developers of varying sizes that would all, arguably fall under the umbrella of indie to one extent or another. Possibly not Blizzard Albany. No offense to them. I don't know if they would consider themselves indie at this stage. But this was just a sample I'd put together from the past year or two of titles, high profile and kind of smaller but really interesting indie titles that were created by local developers. So it encompasses everything from very recognizable brands, as you can see, to original games as well for varying audiences. So that's really the start and the essence of a healthy ecosystem to me. And we've got it in kind of a fledgling form. You've got these more kind of handful of more established companies, and then you've got the whole universe of smaller kind of indies and startups who are trying to make it happen. So that's where we've been more recently, but that's not where we always were. So this is even more little old me, back in the good old 80s, playing my NES,
That's
and
when it
styling.
started.
Yes, this is where it all started, including my fashion sense, as you can see, which I've retained to this day. So I was either going to be a fashion designer or a game designer, as you can tell, and happened to go down the game design route. And I would play a game, I would complete it, I would see a list of names in the credits at the end. So I knew on some level that this was a job people had, but I just didn't know how to get there at the time. And as far as I was aware, there was nobody doing it in the area when I was little. Now I discovered later on, once I got to high school, that actually there was this local studio, there was Vicarious Visions. So, I was very excited to learn about that at the time. So excited, in fact, and I was so eager to find a mentor and be able to talk to somebody who could give me some guidance about how to get to the point where my name was one of the names in those credits, that I wandered into their office as a eager high schooler and kind of talked to the first person that I met. I don't recommend this, by the way. This is not career advice for anyone. Not that any of you need my career advice, but that was kind of the extent to which I really just wanted to be able to connect with somebody who could give me some guidance or mentorship. And they were very gracious and gave me some good advice, but it wasn't like a repeat visit or anything like that, or ongoing mentorship. But I was lucky enough that there was a coding class that I was able to take at the high school I went to, which was Columbia in East Greenbush. So I got started with coding, and I was able to continue. I did a few semesters at good old Hudson Valley here in Troy, and was able to continue building on my study skills and also just general kind of computer science and coding knowledge, which was really helpful for continuity. And then I went to a school called Full Sail in Florida, which at the time was one of 2 schools in the US that offered a game development degree. And I have vivid memories of when we got to our first coding class, we lost half of the students in the class. They switched majors as soon as they encountered coding. And my sense of that was that for a lot of them was the first time they had ever been exposed to coding, and they just found it daunting or didn't feel like they'd be able to get over the learning curve. So I felt very well served, even though I was by no means an expert coder by this stage, just by the fact that I'd had some early exposure to it. And that's part of the reason why we focus a lot on mentorship and supporting aspiring game developers at Tech Valley Gamespace. And try to provide easier paths for folks who want to weigh in, like I did back in the day when I kind of had to figure out my own path to more of an extent than I would hope people would need to. So that's one of the things that we do. After graduating, I got my first job at First Playable Productions here in Troy. But actually, most of my career has been spent elsewhere. It's been spent in the UK, in Scotland, and London. And I won't dwell on this because most people I talk to are tired of hearing me make this comparison. But when I think about sort of economic development within our region, a lot of times the reference points for building a hub of game development would be like Montreal or San Francisco or something. And those can be instructive examples to look at. But my reference example is always Dundee, Scotland, which is one of the places that I lived and worked for 6 years, actually. Was able to work for multiple studios there. This was, an Albany or smaller size city in Scotland that happens to have a disproportionately large games industry that's kind of resilient and thriving, and is a place where you can go there, like I did, kind of uproot my life, move overseas, work for one studio there for a couple of years, and then still have the ability to switch to another studio and still stay in the same location. And that's another really essential thing for having, I think, a healthy, resilient ecosystem, is that amount of kind of level of options and sort of safety net for people if they do need to switch jobs and still stay in the same industry. So I use Dundee a lot as a reference point because I spent a lot of time thinking about what is it that, how were they able to get this disproportionately large game industry in such a relatively small population-wise city? And, the easiest answer is they had a prominent game developer who had some early hits. So they had a developer called DMA that did a game called Lemmings, and then later a little game called Grand Theft Auto. And so they have a lot of the same qualities that we have as kind of an environment, as not a major population center, kind of a economy transitioning from sort of post-industrial, kind of finding the new things. But they really celebrate their game development history, and they're aware of it locally, and it is not, in fact, a secret history. So this is a statue in one of the parks in Dundee of the characters from the game Lemmings. That's like a prominent part of this kind of centralized park area. So it really is a prominent part of their culture that they celebrate. This is a really great article that I recommend checking out. I'm going to stop talking about Dundee, but if you want to kind of learn more about that economic transition, I encourage everybody to check out this article, The City with Grand Designs. Just to get my Google plugin so that you don't kick me out. I did also work for Google DeepMind, who, believe it or not, employ game designers in-house at their AI research lab most recently. So yes, that's my Google connection that I figured I would get in there. So I've also done various indie things, and I just want to get this in. I know I'm low on time, so I am conscious of that. Let me just speed through. These are my 7 reasons to prioritize supporting indie game developers. So I found myself in the position of, needing to make the economic development case for supporting indies, which is not what I'm used to. But as you can tell, like, I'm kind of finding these reference points helpful because I need to be able to make that argument with kind of local stakeholders and state stakeholders. So these are some of the things I emphasize. Indies are heavily focused on creating original game concepts, original intellectual property. And I think that's a big deal. That kind of ties back to the example of sort of Lemmings and Grand Theft Auto from Dundee, right? Those were original games that, local people knew, like, originated in their small city and was like a point of pride that they could kind of talk about. So it created, I'm sure, economic positive impacts, but also brought kind of notoriety to the region. Indies tend to be quite flexible, so it's a little bit easier. They tend to be smaller teams. It's easier for them to sort of uproot, shift to a new project, shift to targeting a new audience. But that also, is a bit double-edged because indies are also more likely to relocate to other areas if support systems already exist there. Just to wrap up, indies are super focused on innovation, and I mean that not just in the technical terms, but in terms of creating games for underserved audiences. And indie game developers tend to come from a wide variety of backgrounds as well, which makes them well equipped to serve those audiences. And having a thriving scene helps a lot with talent attraction and retention, which is a big deal. I can't even count the number of prominent indie developers who have some connection to our region, who have passed through the region. But the key emphasis is they kind of pass through. So the question of how we can get them to stick around is one that's I'm still kind of trying to do more research on. But I do know that having a thriving scene that people are aware of helps in that regard. And last but not least, indies are super invested in creating vibrant and supportive communities within a region, whereas my feeling is, like, once the game studio gets to a certain size, they tend to get more focused on their internal company culture, reasonably so, but smaller indies are often keen to connect and also keen to support and mentor other people, which is a big deal. So that's that. Thank you for bearing with me and letting me go a minute or two over. Apologies to the next speaker. Here's how you can connect with me. Visit techvalleygamespace.org, send me an email, and say hello. Thanks for having me.
Oh, that was
Thanks,
terrific.
Jamey.
Thank you, Jamey.
When I first time met Jamey, I just felt the potential coming through, and I felt he's like underestimating,